The first time I heard about Durnell Village, I was sitting in a diner with a cup of too sweet coffee and a road map unfolded beside my elbow. It was late September. Early leaves had just started to crisp at the edges, and the wind outside whistled with a sound that felt older than the trees. I was tracing a back road loop across the lower counties of Maine, charting forgotten routes for a guidebook that almost no one would read. That was my quiet hope anyway, to record the overlooked places, the barely named spaces between rivers and rail. The waitress, gray braid, gentle voice, name tag read June, noticed my pen circling a road near the edge of the national forest. She leaned in and said, "You're not thinking of going through Durnell, are you?" I blinked. Durnell? Her eyes drifted toward the window like she half expected to see something there. That road's not been used in years. Town's empty. Been that way a long time. That would have been the end of it if she hadn't added. Funny thing, though. People still hear music from there, on still nights, like wind chimes and old radios. No one's lived there in decades. I didn't ask why, not then. I just thanked her, folded my map, and decided that yes, Durnell would be my next stop. I arrived just before twilight. The road narrowed into a one-lane ribbon of cracked asphalt flanked by towering pines. My tires crunched loose gravel as I crossed what might have once been a county line. There was no sign, just a rusting gate half open like someone had meant to shut it, but never finished the job. Durnell didn't so much appear as settle around me. The forest fell away in quiet shivers, and the village came into view not with grandeur, but with a hush. 6 houses, 1 chapel, a store with its windows boarded from the inside. All of it sunken slightly, like time had pressed its palm down for too long. Roofs slanted low, moss grew thick over window frames, and the air had that hollow stillness like the space between breaths. I parked at the edge of what used to be a town square. My car's engine clicked softly as it cooled. I stepped out into silence. There were no animals, no insects, no wind. The sky above had begun to pale into lavender, and the trees at the village's back edge stirred just once, as if in a ripple, and then went still again. I started recording notes on my handheld device. I described the way the chapel door hung slightly ajar, and how the bell tower, though partially collapsed, held one intact rope swaying gently without cause. And then I heard it. 2 soft taps, not near me, but distant, faint, from behind the chapel or somewhere just beyond the reach of the square. I checked my watch. It was 6:47 p.m. I paused the recording and listened harder. Nothing. I chalked it up to a settling board or a limb falling far off and made my way toward what remained of the general store. The plank nailed across the front bore a faded symbol, chalk or maybe carved, 2 concentric circles connected by a curved line, a little like a sideways eye. I felt foolish knocking, but I did anyway. The sound echoed back too long. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Dust hovered mid-air in tight spirals. Shelves still lined the walls, though the items had long since been cleared. I took a few cautious steps in, each footfall answered by a groan in the floorboards, until one of them didn't come from me. It came from behind the old register. I froze. It wasn't a full sound, not a voice or a word, just a breath, the kind you hear right before someone speaks, but no one did. I backed out slowly, pulse thick in my ears. My flashlight beam trembled slightly as I swept it once across the interior. Nothing moved, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something had pulled back just out of view. Back outside, the sky had deepened. Crickets, finally, began to call in uncertain intervals. I made a note about the breath, about the sound I couldn't place, and tucked the recorder into my jacket pocket. I set up my tent just past the square, where the grass grew longer and the earth had softened with age. The village, in the dark, looked almost peaceful. A few structures caught the moonlight like they were still waiting for someone to come home. At 6:47 exactly, I heard the two soft taps again, this time from the opposite side of the square. Then the faintest hum, like static from an untuned radio, and then nothing. I lay still in my sleeping bag, heart low and slow, wondering if I'd just imagined it again. But before I drifted off, I scribbled something in my notebook. Check for radios tomorrow. Mark sound at 6:47 p.m. appears patterned. And beneath that, a single word I hadn't meant to write but had, maybe subconsciously. Listening. I woke to the sound of birdsong. That, in itself, was strange. It wasn't just that the birds were singing. It was the way they did. A slow, rising pattern of 3 notes, almost like a call and response, repeating every 20 seconds. Identical each time. Too perfect, almost rehearsed. I sat up in my tent, the fabric walls already warm with morning sun. Dew clung to the outside and left ghost-shaped blotches where it evaporated. The recorder in my jacket still blinked red. I'd accidentally left it on all night. I rewound and played a few segments as I packed my gear. The birdsong was there, faint. But beneath it, around the 6:47 timestamp, a sound I hadn't noticed until now. The soft click-click of what could only be described as a radio dial turning. Not fast, not rushed, just methodical. One tick, then another, as if someone were trying to find a station that didn't exist. By 8:30 a.m., I'd set off on foot to explore deeper into the village. I marked the chapel on my map and sketched a quick layout of the square. Most of the homes were empty, stripped bare down to their wall studs and dusty linoleum. But one, house number 3 on the east bend, was different. Its front door was closed, not locked, just resting against the frame, and unlike the others, the windows hadn't been smashed or boarded. I pushed the door open with the sleeve of my jacket and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell, damp paper and faint lavender, a scent that reminded me of my grandmother's attic. The second thing was the dust. It lay thick across the floor, except for a narrow line that led from the door to a small writing desk in the far corner. A line made not by a person, but by something being dragged. The desk was simple, oak maybe. On it, a yellowed sheet of paper and an old field radio. Manual dial, cracked antenna, battery slot open and empty. The radio looked decades old, yet recently moved. Its dust pattern mismatched the rest of the desk. The sheet of paper had only one thing written on it: a time. 6:47. I exhaled slowly, same as the sound, same as last night. I looked around. The room was empty, but the sense of presence was real. Not malicious, not even particularly cold, just expectant, like a breath being held. The paper had a faint watermark in the corner, an embossed circle with a curved line slicing through it, the same symbol I'd seen scratched into the front of the general store. I pocketed it carefully and tried the radio. No batteries, no static, just the soft click of the dial. I moved it once. It clicked twice, then stopped. No sound came from the speaker. I whispered, almost to myself, "What are you tuned to?" There was no reply, but the silence that followed had weight. I returned to the village square by noon and set up near the chapel again. I wanted to try something. I'd noticed earlier how the chapel's rope was still intact, and though the bell itself had partially collapsed, the mechanism might still work. At 6:40 p.m., I sat in the grass with the radio and recorder. I wound the dial to the middle position. No sound. I spoke softly into the recorder, trying to replicate the sound from last night. Same time, same position. 6:46. Still nothing. 6:47. 2 taps, exactly the same, but this time closer. And the radio hissed just once, then it spoke. Only for a second, less than a second. A burst of something, Not words, a texture, like fabric rustling or wind through dry reeds. A flutter. Then silence. I leaned in, heart racing, but it was gone. I pressed the stop button, breath catching. When I looked up, something caught my eye across the square. A chair. It hadn't been there before. One of the folding wooden chairs from the chapel, now sitting outside just at the tree line, facing inward toward the square, toward me. I walked over, slowly. There was nothing behind it, no prints in the dirt, just the chair. And on the seat, a single object, a braided reed figure, small, delicate, looped at the top like a pendant. I didn't touch it. Instead, I photographed it, circled it in my notebook, and returned to the tent. I placed the radio beside my recorder and turned them both off. And then I wrote something without thinking. The village is listening back. By the third day in Durnell, the air had changed. It wasn't dramatic, not like a storm rolling in, but subtler. The sky held a faint haze, the kind that blurs the horizon just enough to make the trees look softer, less certain. When I woke, the birds didn't sing their patterned notes. In fact, they didn't sing at all. The silence sat thick, as though the whole place had paused mid-breath. I decided to map the western edge of the village. Past the chapel and store, 2 houses sat at the far end of a narrow dirt lane. Both were nearly swallowed by overgrowth, their roofs bent inward under the weight of time. But one had something different. A lantern. It wasn't lit, not yet, but it hung on a rusted hook by the door as though waiting. Its glass was cracked, the metal frame tarnished, but a faint residue inside suggested it had been used more recently than the house deserved. I hesitated at the doorway, then stepped inside. The air here was heavier, dustier than the others. A smell of damp earth and faint smoke clung to the walls. The interior was stripped bare, save for a long wooden table with 6 chairs. The chairs weren't tucked neatly in. They were all pulled back slightly, as if people had just risen from them at once. On the table was a small pile of objects, not books, not tools. Figures, 6 of them. Twine and reeds braided into shapes, each different, each small enough to fit in a hand. Some had loops like pendants, others stood like little scaffolds. And one of them matched the figure I'd found yesterday, delicately placed on the chapel chair. I pulled out my notebook, sketched their shapes, and wrote down their arrangement. A circle, imperfect but intentional. The floor creaked behind me. I turned too quickly, flashlight beam jittering across the walls. Nothing, just dust shifting in the light. But the lantern by the door was now lit. Its flame was weak, flickering inside the cracked glass, but it was real. I could see the shimmer on the metal frame. I could hear the faint hiss of fuel. I froze, listening. My own breathing sounded too loud. I approached slowly, notebook pressed tight against my chest. The lantern flame swayed once, as though stirred by a hand, but the air was still. No draft, no window open. And then, faint, from deeper inside the house, 2 soft taps. I checked my watch. 6:47 p.m., the same time. Again. I didn't run. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity outweighed fear. Maybe some part of me wanted to understand. Instead, I whispered, "What do you want me to hear?" The flame in the lantern surged, just slightly, before dying back down. I backed out of the house slowly, careful not to disturb the table or the figures. Outside, twilight deepened. The square seemed farther away than usual, the trees taller. I carried the lantern with me, though I don't remember choosing to. Back at camp, I set it beside the radio and recorder. The flames sputtered out just before midnight, leaving only the faint smell of smoke. When I rewound the recorder later, I heard something layered beneath the taps. Not just the click of wood or stone. A voice, not words, just a low hum, almost a tune, almost a lullaby. It repeated twice and stopped. I didn't write much after that, only this scrawled at the bottom of the page. They left the lantern for me. The fourth day began colder. Not the kind of cold you measure in temperature, but the kind that lingers in the joints, in the shadows between beams. I stepped out of my tent and noticed immediately that the grass was damp, though no dew clung to it. My boots left prints that darkened then vanished, as if the earth itself was erasing me. I unrolled my notebook and map at the chapel steps. The square, the store, the lantern house. I marked them all carefully. My lines were straight, my angles measured. But when I glanced away and looked back, the ink seemed to have shifted. Not much. Just a hairline curve where I'd drawn a straight edge. The chapel's outline sagged slightly. The store leaned toward the woods. I shook my head, blaming fatigue. By mid-morning, I decided to check the northern houses. They stood in a row along what had once been a lane, now nearly lost beneath weeds and brittle branches. One door resisted, swollen shut by years of damp, but I forced it open. The interior was strange. Unlike the others, this house had furniture intact, though all of it faced the wrong direction. Chairs pressed up against walls, a table angled into a corner, a bed frame blocking a window. And on the floor, a chalk circle. Faded, cracked, but still there. A ring wide enough to stand in. I crouched, tracing its edge with the tip of my pen. Inside the circle, the dust was thinner, as though something or someone had moved there recently. I whispered aloud, "Why here?" And then I noticed the wall. 4 faint lines etched into plaster, parallel, vertical, spaced evenly like marks on a tally. I sketched them quickly, heart thudding, and that's when I heard it. The faint buzz of a radio. Not mine, not from my camp. It came from outside, somewhere near the trees. A low static, tuning in and out. I followed it as carefully as I could, notebook tucked under my arm. Each step I took, the sound grew clearer until I reached the edge of the forest. There, hanging from a branch about shoulder height, was another lantern. But unlike the one I carried, this one wasn't old. It looked newer. The glass clean, the metal frame uncorroded. Inside it, no flame. Just a tiny speaker, wires coiled messily around the base. The static came from there, and then at 6:47 p.m., 2 sharp taps. The sound cut the static, crisp and deliberate, followed by the same low hum I'd heard before, the lullaby tune. This time, longer. 5 notes, rising and falling in sequence. I froze. Behind me, back toward the houses, another tap answered. 2 knocks, and from deeper in the trees, the same again, 3 places at once. I turned, breath quickening, but the forest swallowed the echoes. When I returned to camp that night, I checked my map again. The northern houses I had drawn were gone. The paper was smooth where I'd sketched them earlier, as if the ink had never touched it. Only the square, chapel, and lantern house remained. I wrote with a shaking hand, "The map is choosing what stays." Then, almost without thinking, I drew the chalk circle in the empty space where the northern houses should have been. And when I looked back, the circle had bled slightly into the paper, darker than my pen should allow, as though something beneath the page wanted it there. By the 5th day, the chapel no longer welcomed me. The door I had left ajar on the first night was shut tight. When I pressed my palm against it, the wood was cool and rigid, as though braced from the inside. I tried leaning my shoulder into it. Nothing. I circled the building, tracing the sagging clapboard with my fingertips. The windows were clouded over with dirt, but one faint shadow showed through. The shape of a chair. Only one, positioned at the center of the room, angled slightly toward the altar. I called out, softly, just to test the air. "Hello?" For a moment there was silence, then 3 knocks, not the usual 2, not at 6:47. But now, midday, and from inside the chapel, I stepped back, pulse echoing in my ears. The sound was deliberate, hollow against wood. A reply. I didn't force it open. Instead, I sat on the chapel steps with my notebook, watching the door as if it might breathe. I sketched the outline, marked the 3 knocks in the margin, and wondered if my presence here was no longer neutral. By afternoon, clouds rolled over the square, dimming the light. I wandered to the general store again, drawn back without choice. The symbol carved into the plank, the concentric circles with the curved line, seemed darker now, like the grain of the wood had deepened to absorb it. Inside, the dust on the floor had shifted. My own footprints from earlier were gone, wiped smooth. But new ones, bare feet, small, lighter than mine, crossed the room. They led from the register to the far wall, then stopped at the boards. I crouched, studying them. The boards bore faint scratches near the floor, as though something had been moved repeatedly. I tapped them with my knuckles. Hollow. Behind the wall, a sound, not knocking this time, not static. A faint murmur, like voices layered too closely to understand, low, overlapping, as though the walls themselves were speaking in sleep. I whispered, almost afraid to hear myself, "I can't understand you." And then silence. I pulled back, exhaling, and left the store quickly. That evening, as dusk pressed against the horizon, I returned to my camp near the square. My lantern, the one I had brought from the house, was missing. I searched the grass, the corners of the tent, even the road. Gone. But on the chapel steps, in its place, was a figure. Braided reeds, shaped like a circle with a cross through the middle. I picked it up carefully. The weave was tighter, neater, as though freshly made. It smelled faintly of smoke. At exactly 6:47, 2 taps rang out, this time from the northern houses I could no longer find on my map. I held the reed figure in my hand and felt the wood fibers warm against my skin. The radio, still by my bedroll, crackled alive on its own. The dial spun once, stopping mid-band, and for the first time, a word slipped through the static. A whisper, barely audible. "Stay." I froze, staring at the darkening sky. My pen shook as I wrote the single word in my notebook. And beneath it, unsteady, I added, "But who wants me here?" On the 6th morning, my map was wrong again. I'd fallen asleep with it open beside me, pen still in hand. When I woke, the ink had changed. The square was there, the chapel too, but the general store had slid several inches to the left, as though the map itself had shifted in its sleep. I tried to redraw it, straightening my lines, forcing order onto paper. But as soon as I looked away, the edges warped again, slight curves where there should be angles, the village tilting away from my control. It felt less like a map now, and more like a pulse. By late morning, I walked back to the northern lane, the one with the chalk circle. This time, the door to the house was already open, swinging gently on its hinge. Inside, the chalk had been redrawn. The ring was thicker, the lines darker, pressed into the floorboards as if with more intent. I stepped into the circle. The air shifted at once, heavier but not suffocating, more like standing beneath a low archway, the kind that makes you instinctively lower your head. I closed my eyes, listened. At first, nothing but my own breath. Then, the faintest hum, the lullaby tune again. 5 notes, steady, rising and falling, this time clearer, almost close enough to follow. I opened my eyes. The chalk line was no longer complete. A gap had opened behind me, wide enough for a step through. I blinked hard, certain I'd misremembered. But no, I had sketched the full circle before. Now it refused to close. I crouched, tracing the break with my finger. The floorboards there were cold, far colder than the rest of the room, and from beneath them, 2 soft taps. 6:47 p.m., though the sun was still high. I stumbled back, heart racing. My watch face flickered as though the battery had weakened, the minute hand trembling between numbers. I pulled out my recorder, whispering, "The circle breaks itself. It doesn't want to be whole. I didn't stay." I backed out of the house, pen still in hand, and made my way to the far end of the lane. There, past the second house, something new waited. A chair, not old this time, but freshly painted white, standing perfectly upright in the grass. On it, a folded piece of paper. I opened it slowly. One sentence written in faint pencil. "Do not redraw what fades." My hand trembled as I copied the words into my notebook. The paper itself was damp, edges softened as though it had been waiting in the grass all night. I returned to the square, setting it beside the reed figures and the radio. At 6:47, the 2 taps sounded again, this time from every direction at once. The radio hummed with static, then cleared, and in the quiet between sounds, my map slipped free from my notebook and landed face up in the grass. A new mark had appeared. Not a house, not a lane, a circle, drawn in ink I hadn't put there, right at the center of the square. I stared at it until the lantern at my side flickered back to life on its own. And for the first time, I wrote not an observation, but a question. Am I inside their map now? By the 7th day, the square felt smaller. Not physically, not in a way I could measure with steps, but in weight, as if the space itself had tightened around me, edges folding inward like fabric being drawn into a knot. I spread my map across the grass again, pen hovering above the ink. The new circle at the center was still there. No matter how many times I tried to erase it, the mark bled through, darker each time, as though my resistance only deepened it. I sat back, recorder in hand, and whispered, "I didn't draw this." The radio clicked on. Not static this time, a clear frequency, a single note held long and steady, trembling like wind across a glass rim. And then my name, soft barely above breath, but unmistakable. I froze. The syllables were exact, the kind of softness only someone close might use, not shouted, not foreign, spoken as though I had been expected. I asked aloud, "Who are you?" The note held, rising a fraction, then fell back into static. No reply. I stood, restless, and walked the square in a slow circle. Each building seemed angled toward me now, their lines leaning in subtle ways, their shadows reaching farther across the grass. The chapel door still barred, but its windows clearer than before, shapes moving faintly within, though no one should have been there. By afternoon, I wandered to the lantern house again. The 6 reed figures still lay in their circle on the table, though one had been moved. No longer upright, but tipped onto its side, facing the doorway. Beside it, a scrap of folded paper. I opened it carefully, half afraid of what I'd find. A page torn from my notebook. My own handwriting, shaky but mine. The same ink, the same pen, and written across the lines in words I didn't remember writing. "You belong to the circle now." I stumbled back, pulse echoing. My notebook, still in my bag, had the missing page ripped clean from the back. I whispered, "I didn't write this." The radio, still clipped to my belt, hissed once, then clear again. "Yes, you did." The voice was mine. My knees nearly gave out. I backed from the table, from the figures, from the whole house, until I was standing again in the lane. The trees above seemed taller, leaning in as though listening. At 6:47 p.m., the 2 taps came again, but this time not from wood, not from stone, from inside my chest. I pressed a hand against my sternum, breath shallow, certain I'd imagined it. But the second tap came again, softer, deeper, echoing like a knock from within. I gasped, writing with trembling fingers, The pattern isn't around me anymore. It's inside me. And as night fell, my lantern lit without touch. The flame burned steady, but the glass fogged. From within the blur, words formed, pressed against the condensation as though traced by an unseen hand. Stay until the circle closes. By the 8th day, my own notes no longer felt like mine. I woke to find my notebook open beside me, a page filled with words I had not written. The ink matched my pen, the spacing matched my hand, but the sentences read like a voice narrating from just behind my ear. It said, "You walked the square 3 times. You looked left. You looked right. You waited for us to answer." The details were true. Every line described things I had done yesterday, written in past tense, as if the notebook had been watching. I turned the page quickly, searching for blank paper, but faint indentations marked the sheet beneath. When I rubbed my pencil across it, the words rose clear. "You will return to the chapel today. You will knock once." I snapped the book shut, pressing my palm hard against the cover, as though weight alone could keep the words contained. My breath trembled. But by midday, I found myself walking toward the chapel anyway. The door remained shut tight, though now a thin line of light glowed faintly at its edges. Warm, golden, steady, as if a lamp burned inside. I raised my hand, stopped, and knocked once. The sound echoed longer than it should have, like a hollow bell struck in slow motion. The glow dimmed, then brightened again. No answer. I turned, stepping back into the square, only to find my notebook lying in the grass where I had not dropped it. The cover was open, the latest page filled. "You knocked once. The circle hears you." I sank to my knees, clutching the book, fighting the urge to fling it into the trees. Instead, I wrote back with shaking fingers. "What do you want from me?" The ink sank deep, feathering outward. My hand stilled as the pen moved again without my push, a reply forming beneath my question. "To finish what was begun." I dropped the pen. That evening, I tried to resist. I sat by the lantern instead, watching its faint glow in the square. At 6:47 p.m., the 2 taps came, but this time, they weren't distant. They weren't in wood or earth. They came from the notebook. The book thudded once on the ground, then again. And when I opened it, the page was blank except for a single sketch, one I knew I had not drawn. A perfect circle, with a chair at its center, the same chair I had seen through the chapel window. I closed the notebook slowly, my throat dry, and whispered aloud into the stillness. "I think it knows me better than I know myself." The lantern flickered once in reply, flame bowing low as if in agreement. By the 9th morning, I stopped pretending I was in control. The notebook opened itself sometime in the night, the pen resting neatly in the crease. A sentence waited for me across the fresh page, steady and certain. "You will sit today." I closed the book at once, but the words lingered in my head. Not a suggestion, not a threat, just inevitability, spoken in ink. I avoided the chapel that day. I avoided the lantern house, the general store, even the northern lane. Instead, I walked the perimeter of the village, pacing the edge where trees thickened into dark walls of pine. Each loop I made should have circled me back to the square, but the paths lengthened strangely, curving wider each time, until I felt I was orbiting something far larger than the cluster of buildings should allow. And yet, no matter how far I walked, I returned to the same spot, the square's center, where the chair waited. It hadn't been there the day before. An old wooden chair, the kind you'd find in a schoolhouse, upright, facing the chapel. On the seat, the reed figure I'd carried days earlier, the one shaped like a circle with a cross. I whispered aloud, "I didn't bring you here." The radio crackled at my side, static forming into faint syllables. "Yes, you did." I shook my head, throat dry. "No, I left it." You carried it inside. The voice was mine again, but not just mine, as though played back through layers of glass, delayed by half a breath. I backed away slowly, but each step I took seemed to close the distance instead of widen it. When I turned, I was still near the chair, still facing the chapel. The notebook slipped from my bag and landed open on the grass. Across the page, words scrawled themselves in real time. Sit, and the circle continues. My knees weakened. I clutched the lantern for balance, though I hadn't lit it. Its glass fogged anyway, and inside, faint letters appeared against the mist. Sit. I lowered myself into the chair. At once, the air changed, heavy but calm. The square hushed deeper than before, the silence thick enough to press against my ears. The chapel door groaned, not open, just a shift, as though something behind it leaned forward. At 6:47 p.m., the taps came. This time, not from the ground or the walls or even my chest, from the chair itself. 2 knocks against its frame, vibrating up through the wood into my spine. And then, soft humming. The lullaby tune again, clearer now, almost whole. I whispered, "Who are you?" The notebook flipped a page on its own. My pen dragged across it without my touch, writing a single line in perfect, even script. "We are what you remember." The radio clicked off. The lantern went dark. And I sat there long into the night, unable to move, afraid of what would happen if I stood too soon. When I finally did rise, the reed figure was gone, but the circle was clearer than ever, drawn into the grass itself, pressed deep as though countless feet had walked it before me. And in the center, faintly carved into the soil where the chair had stood, my name. I no longer trust my own voice. The 10th night in Durnell feels heavier than the rest, and my words, spoken here, written here, don't feel entirely mine anymore. When I play back my recordings, I hear myself ask questions I don't remember speaking. My tone is low, calm, measured in a way I don't recognize. Last night, at 6:47 p.m., I asked, "How long have I been here?" The voice on the tape answered, "As long as we have." I don't remember saying either part. The village has stopped pretending it's empty. Every building I approach now has something waiting for me. A chair turned toward the door. A reed figure tucked neatly on a windowsill. A chalk mark redrawn where I had seen only dust the day before. And always, always the circle. In the grass, in the dirt, on my map. Even when I close my eyes, I see it behind the lids. A faint, glowing ring, pulsing with quiet rhythm. I tried leaving today, packed my tent, folded my map, shouldered my bag. I followed the lane west, past the last house, past the trees that should have opened to the county road. But the farther I walked, the quieter it grew. No birds, no wind. Even my own footsteps dulled, until it felt like I was walking across cloth. And when I looked back, the square was only 10 steps behind me, no matter how far I went. I'm writing this now by lantern light, the glass fogging as though breath is pressed against it from the inside. My notebook fills without me, pages scrawled in my hand, recording what I have not yet done. One page shows tomorrow's date. It reads, "You will open the chapel." I don't know how. The door has been locked since I arrived, sealed with weight. But the words are certain. I want to believe I can resist, that I can put the notebook down, walk away, end this. But each time I try, the circle pulls tighter. Even now, I hear the taps, not just at 6:47 anymore, but at odd hours. 2 knocks from the ground beneath me, 2 knocks from the chair I sit in, 2 knocks inside my chest. I think they're syncing with my heartbeat. If anyone ever finds these notes, know this. I tried to keep distance. I tried to write as an observer, a recorder of strange places. But Durnell doesn't allow observers, only participants. The square is smaller now. My map has only 3 things left: the chair, the circle, the chapel. And tonight, just before midnight, my lantern fogged again. Words formed against the glass, traced by an unseen hand. "You will open the door." "We are waiting," I whispered back, trembling. "I don't want to." The lantern flame bent sharply sideways as though in anger, and the radio clicked on, hissing only one word: "Soon." Last night, I dreamed of the chapel. The door was open in the dream, wide golden light spilling across the square, and I was walking toward it without fear, my notebook already open, pen already moving, as though recording what was about to happen was more important than choosing it. When I woke, the notebook was on my chest. The page said, "Today you will enter." By dusk, the sound began. Not taps this time, but humming. The same lullaby tune, stretched longer, notes bending like wind through warped glass. It drifted from one building to another, never fixed, always shifting. Sometimes near, sometimes distant. I followed it, radio clipped to my belt, recorder in hand. Each time I turned a corner, the hum shifted location. Chapel, store, lantern house. Even the trees at the edge of the square seemed to breathe it. By the time the clock read 6:47 p.m., the sound no longer drifted. It pressed in from all sides, every wall, every window, every stone in the ground vibrating with the same tune. The chapel door shuddered, one slow groan, as though something inside had finally leaned against it too long. And then, with no push from me, it creaked open. Only a sliver. But enough. The humming sharpened, tuning itself into 2 notes that rang together like a detuned radio. My recorder caught them, low, high, low, repeating every 7 seconds. I stepped closer. Inside, the air smelled of dust and ash. The single chair I had glimpsed before was there, centered in the aisle, facing the altar. The altar itself was bare, but the walls pulsed faintly with light. Not lantern light, not flame, but a glow that swelled and dimmed in rhythm with the 2-note hum, as if the entire room were breathing. I took 1 step inside. The radio hissed and snapped. Out of the static came my own voice, calm, steady. "Sit again." I shook my head, whispering, "No." The chair scraped an inch across the floor, legs shrieking against wood. I turned to leave, but the door had already swung closed. I don't know how long I stayed in that space. The hum blurred time. Each breath I took fell into rhythm with it, until I couldn't tell if I was following the sound or if the sound was following me. The notebook slipped from my bag again. It opened to a blank page, and my pen began to drag words without my touch. "Stay until the song ends." I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't matter. The tune was inside me now, threading through bone and breath. My vision wavered. The walls seemed to ripple, stretching and folding, as though the chapel itself were no longer a building but a throat, and I was inside it. The chair scraped again, this time closer to me. And in the fogging lantern glass at my side, letters formed once more. "Tomorrow the circle closes." I didn't sleep last night. The humming never stopped after the chapel door shut. Even now, hours later, it still threads through me, low, high, low, repeating steady as a clock. My body feels tuned to it, as if I'm only here to carry the sound forward. The notebook lies open on the chair across from me. The page has already written itself, though my pen rests untouched at its edge. Today, the circle closes. The chapel walls glow faintly with each rise of the hum. I walk the aisle slowly, lantern at my side. The chair waits before the altar, steady, patient, carved legs rooted deep into the wood. I place the notebook on its seat. The pen rolls once, then stills. The humming stops. The silence is deep, so deep I can hear the small groan of beams, the settling of dust, even the faint pulse in my own ears. And then the taps, 2 knocks. Not from the walls, not from the ground, from everywhere at once. The lantern fogs thickly. Letters scrawl across the glass in sharp strokes. Stand in the circle. I step back into the square. The grass underfoot is pressed flat in a perfect ring, wide and unmistakable. The chair that had stood here before is gone, only my name still etched faintly in the soil at its center. I walk slowly to that spot, each breath even, each step heavy. When I stand there, the circle feels taller than me, as if walls unseen have risen around its edge. The air tightens, then steadies. The taps sound again. 2, then 2 more, and then the lullaby tune, soft and whole for the first time. No broken notes, no static, just 5 rising tones, falling gentle as a sigh. I close my eyes. For a moment, it feels like dozens of others are here. Quiet footsteps in the grass, shapes moving just outside the edge of vision. Not menacing, not even curious, just present. The notebook page turns in the breeze. When I open my eyes, one final line waits across the paper. You are remembered. The lantern flame bows low, then dies with no smoke. The air lightens. The square feels wider again. The chapel stands still, its door shut, no glow at its seams. And the circle beneath me fades into grass, soft and ordinary, as though it had never been pressed here at all. I left Durnell that evening. The road stretched clear to the horizon, no tricks, no shifting paths. When I glanced back, the village was already gone. Trees pressed close where buildings had been. No square, no chapel, no sign of anything but forest. I carry only the notebook now. Its pages are blank again, save for one. The last. The same 5 notes of the lullaby, drawn in rising arcs across the lines, ending with a single word written in steady hand. Home.